McKenzie, interim minister at First Congregational Church in Port Washington, Wisconsin, here with Reverend Don Niederfrank. And just going to gather with you for just a short gap chat. A time that we're going to kick around some theological issues, maybe something of importance to you. Certainly as members of our church, if you have a particular topic or something you'd like to see us address, email us, call the church, let us know.
Yeah.
I think
Jim would be glad to talk about anything.
I think we need to take that on. We shouldn't just be the only ones choosing the topics for gap chats.
Right.
Don't you think? I mean, things that during this time, people may well have had thoughts and concerns and big questions they've had that have been nagging at them for some time. Here's a great time to ask those questions.
We could do that.
We should do that. You should do that. Okay. Well, you were talking about this book. We had started before the gap began that we had started reading Harold Kushner's book, 9 Essential Things About Life that I have learned. And Don and I have continued to read that book. And Don was saying in one of our recent Worship in the Gaps that you really didn't like chapter 5.
Chapter 5 was a problem.
In fact,
and I'll tell you what, in chapter 5, Rabbi Kushner says that what makes us uniquely human is that we are the only species that knows right from wrong. And I take issue with it only out of this. Interestingly enough, there have been experiments done with chimpanzees in cages next to one another, being fed the same thing.
Yeah.
And then cucumbers and pineapples, I think, is what they, chimp A gets a pineapple, chimp B gets a pineapple, they see each other. And then one day, chimp A gets a pineapple, chimp B gets a piece of cucumber. And he looks over at chimp A, and he looks at his cucumber, and he's angry. And he's angry because he has a very primitive, that's the right word, sense of injustice that comes from this. A sense of injustice is our first moral sense as children. It happens when I identify with another, usually with my sibling. Yeah. And I figure, okay, my sibling and I are alike. We eat at the same table, we get the same meal, so on and so forth, and then pretty soon I'm being put to bed and my sibling is staying up and gets to watch TV.
Right.
That's not fair. And those of us who've had children, we know that's the first moral outrage. How come she gets to do that? How come he got a bigger,
Yeah.
That happens at a very primitive level in us. It also happens in primates, certainly with chimpanzees. And here's another aspect that's very interesting that they've done. Same parallel, living next to each other. One day, chimp A gets 2 pieces of pineapple. Chimp B gets nothing. Chimp A looks down at his pineapple, looks over at chimp B, gives him a piece of pineapple. That sense of justice is not unique to human beings. We are unique in other ways.
Yeah, so Kushner is saying that we all have a moral chip embedded in our DNA somewhere.
Right.
And that makes us better, I think he's saying, than all the other species.
E.O. Wilson said the same thing. E.O. Wilson, he's an ant scientist, but he was written about other things. He's an evolutionary biologist who said that moral sense that we seem to have, we had an evolutionarily positive function.
Yeah.
That as moral beings, that we survived better as moral beings.
So
that kind of takes it out of the realm of the religious and says, but it is a gift of God.
it is
a gift of the Creator.
It is a gift of God.
So let's go to chapter 6.
You want to go to chapter 6?
Chapter 6.
Because that's where I think there is a strong connection between the question that Kushner asks, but at least in your estimation, answers it incorrectly.
Right.
You disagree with Kushner. So one of the things that I like about the book is chapter 6. And he says in chapter 6 that religion is not something you talk about. It's something you do.
Yeah.
You like that.
I love that. I love that he said there is no commandment to believe in God. There is no command to be a theist. Of all of the 10 commandments and all of the various laws in the Hebrew Scriptures, no one is commanded to believe in God. They all have to do with what you do.
Exactly. And yet, can I just sort of throw a wrench into all of that?
Sure.
Because throughout the history, the 2,000-year history of the Christian church, that's all we've ever done.
Yes.
Is debate about doctrine and dogma. You believe this, I believe that. I can take half of what you're saying and a quarter of this, and we divide, and the church looks like anything but unified.
Oh, right.
And yet nobody would argue if let's say, we took as our starting point, love God and love your neighbor. Who would argue with you loving and caring for someone else? What's to debate about that?
Right.
But let's get back to debating about the Trinity. Let's get back to talking, debating, and disagreeing about the Lord's Supper, about baptizing infants or adults, and all of this.
Yes, yes.
But that's where all the heat and all the fire is in Christendom.
And no light. It's all heat.
There is no light in these debates.
And see, no, go ahead.
No, I got to hear this.
Well, I just want to say that's where Paul cursed us by taking a Jewish understanding of God and what it means to be faithful into a Greek world of philosophy and polytheism and debates and an intellectual life, and all of a sudden what it meant to be a follower of Jesus was not to do as Jesus did, but to think as Paul was thinking about Jesus.
So I'm going to have to go back and read the 25th chapter of Matthew, because I guess I was remembering it one way. I'm getting all confused now. When Jesus separates the sheep from the goats, was it that he was separating those with the true, correct doctrine and those who didn't believe properly? Or did he say something about entering into the kingdom all of those who had fed the hungry,
Right.
Clothed the naked, visited the sick and the imprisoned? Jesus never once went to the mat for doctrine.
No.
He never once cared, I think, about doctrine. In fact, he cared about love. Our last Worship in the Gap, we talked about this passage in John 9. And in that, Jesus heals this blind man, blind from birth, and yet he gets in hot water with the leaders of the synagogue because it happened to be on the Sabbath. And they wanted to talk about faith. They wanted to talk about religion, rules, restrictions, regulations. Jesus wanted to do religion. He wanted to do the will of God.
Right, exactly. And you know, both of us are of a certain vintage. Well, let me say that I'm of a certain vintage, that I grew up very much in a doctrinal
Did you?
understanding.
Uh-huh.
I grew up, as those who have listened to me heard me say over and over, I grew up with the Heidelberg Catechism.
Oh.
Questions and answers. Everything you needed to know between
Yes.
two covers.
And you were...
And
yeah.
the purpose of that was so that when we were done memorizing those questions and answers, we would have the right doctrine. And because we had the right doctrine, we were then allowed to participate in the sacrament of communion. But you just couldn't wander up there and have some bread and wine unless you had the right understanding of what was going on. And it's been so refreshing, so good to watch American Christianity, at least, in many circles, mainline circles especially, move beyond the valuing, the overvaluing, the idolatry of doctrine into what do we do?
What do we do? How shall we live?
Right. And part of this, I think, I'm not sure it's true. I'm not enough of a church historian or a cultural historian, but you know, it's one of the differences between Buddhists and Christians. Mm-hmm. You know, it used to be you'd ask a Christian, what do you believe? And Christians often ask Buddhists, what do you believe? Buddhists ask, what is your practice?
How do you live?
How do you live?
How do you live out your faith?
Yeah.
And don't we intuitively know this? Don't we at some time talk about, sort of gossip about those who say they believe such and such, but they live differently?
Right.
That's because we place so much emphasis, I think, upon what we say we believe and very little upon grace, forgiveness, and love.
Right.
Well, this is Jim McKenzie and Don Niederfrank. Quick little gap chat for you. Let us know what you think. Email us, text us, call the church,
leave a message,
ask for our resignations, whatever. But we hope you're doing well in the gap. And as always, may God bless you, and may God bless First Congregational Church.